Berry Gordy built the most powerful dream machine in the history of American music. And one afternoon in 1965, he sat in a room while that dream machine said no to Jimi Hendrix. He didn't know it yet. That's the part nobody talks about. By 1964, Motown Records was not a record label. It was a philosophy. Gordy had taken an $800 loan from his family savings pool and turned it into the sound of a generation. The building at 2648 West Grand Boulevard in Detroit looked like nothing from the outside. A converted house with a hand-painted sign that read, Hitsville, USA, like a dare. Inside, it was a different world entirely. A world of precision, discipline, and controlled perfection. Gordy had an instinct that most people in the music business lacked. He understood that talent alone meant nothing. What mattered was presentation. What mattered was the frame around the painting. His artists went through etiquette classes, choreography rehearsals, media training. They learned how to walk into a room, how to give an interview, how to dress for a room that wasn't ready for them yet. He had watched other black artists get chewed up by the industry, exploited, underpaid, discarded, and he had decided that the way to protect his people was to make them untouchable, to make them so polished, so controlled, so undeniable that the industry had no choice but to receive them on their own terms. Gordy was building something that could cross over. Black music made powerful enough to play on every radio station in America, not just the ones that already wanted it. It worked. The Supremes, the Temptations, Marvin Gaye, Four Tops, Smokey Robinson. By mid-decade, Motown was not just a label. It was a cultural force, a sound, a statement. But it was also a filter. Gordy had a phrase he used in internal meetings, something his A&R team knew by heart. We don't make music for musicians. We make music for everyone. It sounded generous. In practice, it meant something more specific. It meant that anything too rough, too unpredictable, too resistant to the machine didn't make it through the door. Nobody said this out loud. Nobody had to. The people who worked in that building understood the standard without being told what it was. You could feel it in the hallways, in the way sessions ran, in the way Gordy would listen to a playback and say nothing for a long moment and then say, not yet. Two words that meant everything. Not yet. Come back when it sounds the way it's supposed to sound. In 1965, a young man named Jimi James was playing guitar in New York City for almost nothing. He had come up through the Chitlin circuit, through Army service, through years of backing other people's acts. Little Richard, the Isley Brothers, King Curtis, doing the work, learning the instrument, carrying someone else's name on a marquee, while his own hands were doing things no one had ever seen a guitarist do. He played with his teeth. He played behind his back. He coaxed sounds from a Stratocaster that seemed to come from somewhere outside the physics of the instrument. Feedback used as melody, distortion used as texture. The tremolo bar turned into a human voice. He had been doing this since he was a teenager in Seattle, sitting in his room with a one-string ukulele his father had given him, listening to blues records and trying to understand how the men on those records were getting those sounds out of a piece of wood and wire. He had gotten very good at figuring it out. He had gotten better than anyone around him at almost every stage of his life. But in 1965, none of that was a career. It was just noise to most of the people in the room. He was broke. He was largely invisible. He had been dropped, passed over, looked through, talked around. He played small clubs in Greenwich Village under the name Jimi James and the Blue Flames. And on good nights, other musicians would stop at the door and watch, their drinks going warm in their hands. On most nights, nobody stopped at the door at all. He was trying every channel available to him, every label, every A&R man, every door that seemed like it might open. He wrote letters. He made phone calls. He showed up. He played. He showed up again. The rejections came in different shapes, but they all said the same thing underneath. Not this. Not now. Not you. One of those doors had a Motown logo on it. Nobody announces these moments before they happen. There was no gravity in the room that day. No sense that something important was being decided. A young guitarist came in. Someone listened. The fluorescent lights hummed the same way they always hummed. Outside, Detroit kept moving. The factories running, the city doing what cities do, indifferent to what was happening in one small room inside one converted house on West Grand Boulevard. The guitar playing was not something you could simply dismiss. Even then, even unformed, even before the world had a name for what he was doing, the sound he made was different from the sound other people made. There was something in the way he touched the strings, something that made the instrument respond like it had been waiting for exactly that hand. The people in the room heard it. They were not deaf, and they were not fools. They heard it clearly. There was a moment, and anyone who has ever sat in an A&R meeting knows this moment, where the air in the room shifts slightly, where the people in the chairs make some small involuntary adjustment, where something is being registered before anyone has decided what to do about it. That moment happened, and then the filter engaged. Too raw, too uncontrolled, no clear image. Where does this fit? Who is the audience? What's the story we tell around this? Those were the questions, and they were not unreasonable questions. They were exactly the right questions for the machine that Gordy had built. The verdict came the way verdicts came at Motown, cleanly, without cruelty, without particular drama. This wasn't right for them. The door was not slammed. It was simply, quietly closed. Jimmy picked up his guitar. He walked out. He kept going. Nobody remembers what he said on his way out the door. Maybe he didn't say anything at all. He had heard no enough times by then that one more no didn't require a response. It was just another door. There would be other doors. Or there wouldn't. And that would be that. Chaz Chandler found him in 1966. Chandler, the former Animals bassist, watched him play in a New York club and went pale. He brought him to London. He renamed him. He put him in front of people who were looking for something dangerous, something that felt like the future arriving ahead of schedule. The London rock scene in 1966 was hungry in a different way than New York was. It wasn't looking for polish. It was looking for fire. And fire was something Jimi Hendrix had in quantities that no one had measured yet. Are You Experience was released in May 1967. Somewhere in Detroit or New York, or wherever the Motown machinery was running that spring, someone heard it. Maybe it came through a radio in an office. Maybe someone brought the album in, set it on a desk, and someone else picked it up and turned it over and looked at the cover, and something caught. Maybe it arrived the way important things arrive, quietly without announcement, and then suddenly it was everywhere, and you couldn't remember a time before it. The sound of that record was not easy to ignore. It was not designed to be ignored. It was designed to do things with a guitar in a studio that people hadn't thought of doing yet, to make rock music feel like it had just been invented in a room by someone who had never heard the rules and wouldn't have followed them anyway. Gordy heard it. Of course he heard it. There was no dramatic moment, no meeting convened to discuss what had been missed. That's not how these things work. The realization comes slower than that and quieter. It settles into the body like weather. He heard it, and somewhere underneath the label head, in the businessman, in the architect of the machine, something registered. He knew that guitar, not the record, not the production, not the version of it that London had made. But underneath all of that, the thing that was generating all of it. He knew what those hands could do. He had run it through the filter, and the filter had returned its verdict. The filter had been right about what it was. It had been wrong about what that meant. All Along the Watchtower came out in September 1968. By then, Jimi Hendrix was not a rumor or an underground figure. He was everywhere. He was on the radio stations that Motown had spent years trying to access. He was on the covers of magazines. He was playing arenas. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a room when a song comes on and you realize you are hearing something that will outlast you. Gordy was a man who understood music at a molecular level. He had built a machine for capturing it, shaping it, delivering it. He had spent 15 years learning what a hit felt like before it became a hit. And when All Along the Watchtower came through whatever speaker he was near, on whatever afternoon it found him, the opening guitar, that sound, those notes bending around Dylan's words like they had always lived there, he would have known immediately. Not just that it was good. He would have known where he had heard that guitar before. He didn't say anything about it. Not publicly, not then. That is its own kind of statement. The morning the news came, Berry Gordy was 50 years old. Jimi Hendrix died in London on September 18th, 1970. 27 years old. The music world went quiet in the way it goes quiet when it loses someone who hadn't finished yet. Someone whose catalog felt like a rough draft for something larger that would never now be written. Gordy didn't give interviews about it. He didn't issue statements. He was running a label, managing careers, dealing with the thousand small emergencies that a business like Motown generated every day. But there are people who were around him in those days who remember something quieter than grief, something more complicated. A pause, a quality of attention when the name came up, the way a man looks when he is doing arithmetic in his head and doesn't like the answer. Years passed, decades. Motown moved to Los Angeles. The hits continued and then changed and then became history. Gordy built more careers, wrote a memoir, received honors, gave speeches. He talked about the artists he had signed, the ones he had developed, the ones he had loved. He talked about the machine he had built and what it had cost him and what it had given him and why it had been worth it. In 2002, a journalist sat with him and asked about the artists he had missed. Not the ones who had left, the ones who had never made it through the door at all. Gordy was quiet for a moment. He is not a man who is quiet often. Then he said, "There were people I didn't understand yet. There was at least one person I heard and didn't hear at the same time." He didn't say the name. He didn't have to. The journalist didn't ask him to. Some silences are complete enough that filling them would only make them smaller. The filter at Motown was not a mistake. It was the reason the machine worked. It was the reason the Supremes could walk into a room in 1965 and make the room recalibrate. It was the reason Marvin Gaye's voice reached people who had never been reached before. The filter was doing exactly what it was built to do. But filters are designed for the things they recognize. And Jimi Hendrix was not something anyone was designed to recognize yet. He was something that arrived before the vocabulary for him existed. He was too early for his own moment, and then suddenly exactly on time, and then gone before the moment had finished with him. The man who said no in that office in 1965 was not wrong by the standards of the machine he was operating. He was only wrong by the standards of everything that came after.